Hello, and a very warm welcome to this, which is our 35th teaching in this series on the Mahayana Uttara Tantra Shastra, this wonderful text by the great master Asanga, inspired by Buddha Maitreya. And yes, well, let's start in the very, very excellent way of the Bodhisattva, reminding ourselves of no self, and that the true nature that we've been studying of everything is this vast expanse of the two truths, where there is endless being through cause and effect. And the very nature of that being is like a dream, like an illusion, like a mirage. And so it has no own lasting existence. And so we remind ourselves of the deep truth. We remind ourselves in the relative world of the enormous and in a way needless suffering that there is. Some of it so horrible. It's barely contemplable, if that's the word. You can't even bear to think about it. So there is a lot of suffering, and somebody should do something about it. Yep. Well, that's us. And so we are really setting our hearts on a future where we have the skills, the wisdom, the courage, the patience, the diligence, all of everything that's needed to really help our fellow beings, and in the process to get rid of the delusion of ego, which is at the root of all of our problems. We take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the community of most noble minds. From this moment on until we reach the very heart of enlightenment, through our practice of generosity and all six transcendent virtues, may we reach total awakening and every enlightened quality to be able to truly help sentient beings so lost in samsara. May each and every being be well. May they live long and be healthy, be well provided for, have good friends and find respect. May they live in places of peace, places of plenty. Most of all, may they practice Dharma. May they each create the causes for these good circumstances to be their wealth in future lives. May they be free from suffering and from creating the causes of future suffering. May they discover the natural, sacred well-being totally beyond suffering and attain the great equanimity that's free of closeness or distance from anyone. Deyata Shame Shamawati Shameta Shatru Om Kurim Arajite Karota Keore Tejawati Oloyane Pishuda Nimale Malapa Naye Kukure Kaka Grase Grasana Om Muki Paramuki Amuki Shame Dawani Sawa Graha Bandanane Negri Itva Sawa Bhava Pravadina Vimukta Marapasha Savedva Buddha Mudra Anudgatita Sava Mare Putsarite Parishude Biga Shantu Sava Mara Kamane. Glorious Guru, source of all blessing, ever present above our heads on lotus and moon seat, through your immense kindness, ever sustain us, that the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind flow from you, and we are one. So we're nearly at the end of the 6th of the 7 main sections of this work, and what we've been looking at is enlightened qualities, the qualities of enlightenment. And we've looked at the details. I hope by now at least you know the very external knowledge, the list. You should know how many special qualities of wisdom there are, the powers of wisdom. How many are there? 10. And you should know how many special forms of fearlessness are attributed to the Buddha. 4. And you should know that there are a certain number of very distinctive qualities unique to a Buddha, and that there are 18 of those. And now we looked at the 32 special marks. So altogether that makes 64. But again, what must be said is the real number of Buddha qualities is infinite. Buddha mind is everywhere, is present in every moment of everything. And so the qualities are truly endless. Here we're mainly looking at when the Buddha, this Buddha mind, which is everywhere, this truth of mind, this purity of mind, when it manifests in a teaching way, then those qualities are very present. One thing that's quite good in modern times is that people talk about the universe, in the same way that people in the past would have talked about God. God did this, by the grace of God this happens. You've got a somebody, and now you've got something that's much sort of faster, which is the idea of the universe. Is actually quite helpful, except that it's got too much of a physical ring. The universe makes us think of planets, galaxies, material distance, things far away and close, beings maybe on another planet, in another galaxy, so far away in our terms. And then we think of a vast universe. So it's helpful, but in Dharma, everything is within. Every being that in one way externally is so far is another variant of this mind that we are studying. Everything, everybody is here in our heart. So the idea of the universe is very helpful, because people's trouble in understanding Buddha qualities, and then when we come especially to the next chapter, Buddha activity, that we'll start today, then people think in our habitual thinking way of a somebody, being, becoming. You become a bodhisattva. And then the bodhisattva becomes a bigger bodhisattva, a better bodhisattva, and in the end you become a Buddha, this kind of concrete, centralized being as opposed to everything else and everyone else, is a delusion that makes it harder to understand what's going on. So here we're looking at what we call it, that, thusness, the way it is, the absolute truth of things, and which other people might call the universe. We're seeing how that manifests in worlds, in people's lives, as a teacher. And when it does that, then it's very special. It's not like manifesting as an ordinary being. it manifests as, when it's a supreme Nirmanakaya, totally fearless. And when you have the experience of a teacher, that kind of teacher, then their body is wonderful. It's so beautiful you can barely look at it. It's the feeling, the presence is totally overwhelmingly magnificent. And that very presence tells you of all the journey of that bodhisattva who became a Buddha. And the wonderful karma they made that gave rise to the 32 marks and so on. So I think that's important to bear in mind. If we've got the idea of a being becoming another being, and acquiring something, we've missed it. And if you remember, much earlier on in this text, there was a quote from one of the most famous Buddha Nature Sutras, which said, there is nothing to be removed from this. There's nothing to add. And when we perfectly see what is perfect, then there is perfect liberation. So we're talking about this thusness, the isness of everything and everyone. It's the, how can you say, the biggest thing we could ever think of. It's not a person, restricted, limited, especially like us in time and in space. So where we left was at the end of the 32 special marks of a Buddha, I think. Yeah. And so I may have got that wrong, but yeah, we got to the end of those and to the scriptural source. So we're on page 265 and verse 268. And so this chapter on Buddha qualities continues. Now we've been through the 64 qualities in those 4 groups, 10 powers, 4 fearlessnesses, 18 distinctive qualities, 32 marks. Then we look first at the examples. We remind ourselves of the examples. Now we've gone through all the details. We're not going to find something new. It's going to be this is what it says, a recapitulation. So verse 268 says, being invulnerable, undisheartened, peerless and unmoving, they are illustrated by the examples of a Vajra, a lion, space, and the clear moon in water. So we've seen that. That's bringing us back to a focus on the 4 examples. Vajra, lion, space, and the reflection of the moon in water. So now we'll explore that a bit further. So at the bottom of the page it says a further discussion of the examples. And we'll look at this going back to our general template of enlightenment. It's 2 aspects. One is the fulfillment for oneself, one is fulfillment for helping others. So the fulfillment for oneself is the vimuktikaya, the freedom, the fact that we become as free as anyone can ever become. It is the ultimate freedom, liberation from all of the bonds. Bondage, imprisonment is kind of the idea here. It's not nice to be in prison. Yeah. One of our former French prime ministers was actually sent to prison. He's the first French prime minister ever to have been sent to prison for something like 10 days or 3 weeks. And he wrote a book about how terrible it was. And he had very special prison circumstances. It was kind of like 5-star prison. but it was agony for him. And I forget who it was, but at the same time another book has come out of somebody who spent years in prison and who turned it into a most wonderful learning adventure, learning things, learning about himself, becoming a stronger, better person. And like somebody that I learned from and worked with, Khenpo Tsena, he was 18 years in a Chinese prison. And, that's a tough place to be. He's a doctor. And so he started treating his fellow prisoners. He asked for permission to just go around near the prison to collect herbs. And by the end of the 18 years, he was treating 10,000 people a year. People in the prison, the guards of the prison, people in the local villages. And so anyway, here we're looking at nasty prisons, prisons that really limit you, confine you, chains, handcuffs, whatever, straitjacket, where you are very limited and not in a good place. So we're looking at the ultimate freedom and what brings us, what sets us free. So first we look at the qualities of freedom, verse 269. Of these, 6, 3, and 1 powers, that's 10 powers, we're back to the 10 powers, and they're in groups of 6 and 3 and 1, have completely dispelled, respectively, what is cognitive, meditative balance, and those accompanied by latent conditioning. So this is poetry. It's very concise. The main reason for poetry in these teaching texts was so people could learn them by heart. And I remember my teachers, Khenpos, they would walk around and they would just be reciting these verses, which are sort of so nicely written in Tibetan and Sanskrit and very, very memorable. So it needs unpacking. So 6 of the powers were there to remove the obscuration, the prison of deep ignorance. So that's mainly ignoring our Buddha nature, and because of that, being in a world of duality, of self, an illusion of self and other, of inside and outside, self and other beings, and a perceiver perceiving a universe which is different for oneself. This is the cognitive, it's called the cognitive obscuration, or the obscuration to true cognition, to true realization. So that's like a veil, a blockage. So 6 of the 10 powers are concerned with removing that. 3 are concerned with removing the obstacles to meditation, to successful meditation and brilliant meditation, which is not laborious, where you don't have to work for days, weeks, months, years, lifetimes to get to the result, where it's at one's fingertips. So 3 of the powers related to that, and 1 power is about karma and all of the conditioning of the mind that makes us repeat harmful karma again and again and again because of habit. So the powers remove those 3 areas of obstacles: wisdom obstacle, meditation obstacle, karma obstacles. So it says, therefore they've pierced, destroyed and felled the armor, the walls and the trees. They pierced the armor, destroyed the walls and felled the trees. Verse 275 over the page. Worldlings That's us, that's me at least. Shravakas, those one-sided, the wise and the spontaneously arising have progressively subtler understanding, as exemplified by the element fire. By the elements 5, sorry. I'm having my glasses renewed, so I've got an old pair which aren't quite so good. The elements 5, not the element fire. So the 5 elements. So we've got an order. Beings in the 6 realms of samsara whose existence is mainly determined by karma, worldlings. Shravakas, those following the lesser path, the Hinayana path. Those one-sided, it's the Arhats and especially Pratyeka Buddhas. The wise, these are the Bodhisattvas, and the spontaneously arising, these are the Buddhas. So we're looking at a kind of an order of freedom. We're looking at the qualities of freedom. Who is more imprisoned, who is less imprisoned. So beings, I'll just read the text. Beings each have their limits of understanding, especially when it comes to understanding the ultimate truth. Those steeped in worldly existence have many emotions, thoughts, clouding and colouring their understanding. They're compared to the earth element, as it is the most dense, the thickest, the heaviest. Less densely obscured are the Shravakas, who understand the voidness, the non-existence of self, of ego. So they are compared to water, less solid, less heavy, more fluid. Even more subtle and less dense is fire, used here to denote Pratyeka Buddhas, whose wisdom is further reaching and starts to touch on the voidness of not just self, but the voidness of things, phenomena. Less blocked still is the element of wind, depicting here the twofold voidness understood by bodhisattvas. So up to there we've got the 4 elements, earth, water, fire, wind. Now we come to the last step, the Buddhas. Their understanding is unobstructed, unlimited, and most subtle. So it's like the element space, the omniscience of the Buddhas. Their qualities are unique, unlike those of any of the other 4 types just mentioned. Verse 276 then takes this further, because it says, in one way, they are like space. Now, space doesn't change. Fire changes. Fire comes and goes. Earth comes and goes. There's more of it, less of it. Water comes and goes according to causes and conditions. Space never changes. It remains the same. But then Buddha isn't just like that. Buddha is also like the first 4 elements because of compassion, compassionate manifestation to help beings. But that's what we've been looking at. Enlightened beings' qualities in our world, how we experience them. Fearless. They don't need to be fearless. They've gone beyond fear. They show fearlessness, as we saw, when they're teaching, in declaring the truth, in showing people their obstacles and so on. So in our world, they manifest. So verse 276 says, Buddhas are like the earth, water, fire, and wind, being sustenance for all the worlds. But they're also like space, being beyond the characteristics of both worldly existence and what transcends it. So it says, thus, as 32 qualities are fashioned, these aspects of Dharmakaya, even so they are inseparable as the color, brilliance, and shape of a gem. So what it's saying about the qualities is we've been looking at them, studying them as lists and looking at the details inside the lists and saying, okay, but these are all manifestations of one and the same thing. So the example, and this is always the frustrating bit because I do have some nice crystals and things, and it just does not work on a video camera. They all look white. You can't turn it round and see a blue point of light, a red point of light, a green point of light. You can't see. If it's a faceted crystal, you can't see this set of patterns, turn it round another set of patterns. It doesn't work. And bother. But it doesn't work. But so we have to imagine it. I can't show it to you, we have to imagine it. Is that we can examine a gemstone and we can focus on its color. What shade of red is not a very Buddhist example, but I remember traveling in India. I was fascinated 50 years ago by gemstones. And everyone wants you to come into my shop and look at their gemstones. And whether you buy something or not, they're hopeful. And so then they would show you rubies. And they always, the thing for rubies in India, they say, color of pigeon's blood, which is a terrible thing for us Buddhists. But it is that color. It's that very specific red. So you can focus on that. And then you can focus on the shape of a gemstone and its hardness. One way you can tell what sort of a stone you've got is to use you hit it with a special machine that tells you its hardness. And then you know whether it's a diamond or a sapphire or whatever. We can focus on all those things, but they're just all qualities of this one stone. So this part of the text is bringing us back and saying, yes, Buddha mind, it's got this, but it's all part and parcel, as Taisituma likes to say these days quite a lot, part and parcel of the one reality, which is the timeless, changeless mind. So there we were looking at the qualities of freedom. Then we look at the qualities of maturity. These attributes, which when experienced, it says when seen, but it means when experienced, doesn't mean seen with just the physical eyes, inspire contentment. And they're known as the 32, founded in the two kayas, the Sambhogakaya and the Nirmanakaya. The way the Sambhogakaya manifests to bodhisattvas, and there they always see these 32 signs. The way Buddha mind manifests in our world, the 6 realms of karmic existence, sometimes some of them of the 32 signs are apparent. But this feeling of contentment, perfection, that's bestowed by the presence of a Buddha or a very, very great spiritual being. It's impossible to describe, but it kind of answers all the questions. There's one doha, one spiritual song, I've been trying to put into music and poetic form for about 15 years, and I've still not succeeded. But it's a dream that Mapa had. And it's a dream he had of the great Siddha Saraha, whom he never met because he was a few generations before. And in that dream, he actually met Saraha, and he said, now I've experienced Saraha's presence. I have no more questions, nothing I could ever more wish for on the spiritual path. It's like being there, totally. And all this inner, how can you say, awareness of who we are and where we're at, and a longing to go further, and all of that's gone. And if you have the chance to be with such wonderful spiritual beings, it feels like the most natural thing in the world when they're there. When they go, it's a horrible letdown, because all of a sudden what was the most natural thing in the world is gone, and you're gradually coming back down to your karma. It's like Gagarin in his parachute coming down to Earth for the final landing. We're back where we started. So they're founded in the Kayas to Nimanakaya and Sambhogakaya, which make the Dharma perfect. Over the page, verse 279, those further from purity and those closer see these in two ways. As being in the world, so that's when they experience Nimanakaya in the worlds of the six realms, or as the mandala of the Buddhas, that's how the bodhisattvas in the 10 levels experience them. So they are like the form of the moon. The moon seen in water, that's our experience of Nimanakaya. It's a reflection of the truth. But when we look up at the real moon in space, that's the example for the vision of the bodhisattvas. So with that, we've finished this 6th chapter on Buddha qualities. Of course, we've gone through it. We're not finished with it. You won't finish with it in this life. There's so much to go deeper into. I was watching the other day on, I've got a favorite orchestra now. I found an orchestra, it's the Frankfurt Philharmonic, I think it's called, under certain of its conductors. It's incredible. For me, I've heard renditions of some of my favorite pieces better than anything I've heard anywhere. So you hear it the first time, you think, gosh, this is good. They've been recorded on TV a few times, very, very nicely. You know, when you've got about 6 cameramen, and when the bassoons come in, they're there on the bassoons. And when the percussion comes in, you've got the timpani, boom, 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 like this. And you watch the videos 3, 4, 5 times. Each time you get deeper and deeper into the music. And you can really appreciate what the composer was doing when they wrote it, how they transitioned, had this instrument and this one in the background. So first time you get first blast of a piece of music, but then second time, third time, 5th time, I don't know, I get up to 10th and 20th time without getting fed up with them. But anyway, you go deeper and deeper and deeper, and your appreciation rises in so many ways. It's like, in that example, for each instrumentalist, and then for the whole piece, the composer and so on, it just gets deeper. But anyway, for now, we've finished that chapter. So now we come to Enlightened Activity. So we're finished with me telling you about the 10 powers, 4 fearlessness is the 18 distinctive qualities and the 32 special marks. That was that chapter. Now, Buddha activity is easy. you only have two things to remember that you must know about it if you've studied this text. It is spontaneous and non-conceptual. Spontaneous and non-conceptual. You don't need to turn your microphones on, but let's say it together. Okay, I want to see your lips moving. Spontaneous and non-conceptual. So we're looking at activity, and most activity, to be good activity, and we've covered this before in this course, but here we go again, needs planning, and that planning involves thinking. So planning is preparation, and then in the end we do what we're going to do. So normally the better you've thought it out and the better you've planned, then the more successful the action is likely to be. If you didn't plan well, and then if your thinking wasn't so good, then you hadn't. What do people say? Oh, I hadn't thought about that. You just flooded the garden with your attempt to make a pond or whatever. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. So this is the normal way activity, successful activity, works. Buddha activity is spontaneous. So we have and non-thinking. And we have examples of this that we can think of. Maitreya gives us 9 examples, and we explore them one after another to see the point that's being made. And then we take them all together to see how, yes, this is a good example of Buddha's activity, but it doesn't work for this. And then this is a good example for another sort. It doesn't work for that. We look at the 9 together and see which is the best. And then we'll conclude, but in the end, there's no example that works, really and truly. And it's only meditation practice, our own evolution, our own awakening, our own freedom, which can bring us closer to an understanding and appreciation of how Buddha activity works. Remember, we're not talking about an individual, a Buddha, who's doing activity. It's more like how the universe works, how mind works, how your own mind works to produce your karma, your experience, and your spiritual journey. We're looking at that vastest, largest picture of how that acts, not an individual. So the way the chapter goes is with a brief introduction, and then we expand it, especially through these 9 examples. So we're on page 271 and verse 280. First we have the summary, one about its spontaneity. Ever spontaneous are the all-embracing one's actions. Regarding the temperaments of those to be trained, the means for training them, the trainings suited to their abilities and dispositions, and their own movements in terms of time and space. So, Buddha activity is whatever action there is, whatever activity, whatever teaching, guiding, awakening, freeing activity comes out of the universe, our mind, Buddha mind, whatever we call it. The largest picture, it says here, the all-embracing, embraces everything, is determined by the person it's helping. What they want, what they're capable of, what they can do given time and space, given the life they're in just now, the body they're in just now, Like, I'm a Brit with an old body living in France, with the social structure here. It's pretty good in terms of most countries in the world, but it's got its limits. It's got its limits. Like yesterday, I wanted to look into a Tibetan text. It's in Scotland, in my house, and there isn't a version of it online. There's only the Tibetan paper copy. So tough luck. Tough luck about that. I've got my limits. So Buddha couldn't send me an inspiration. Look at the third line on that page, because the page isn't here. So that wouldn't work. And so it needs to be in terms of the person at that point in their journey. And it needs to not undersell or oversell, not give them guidance that's below their level, not give them guidance that's beyond their level. It needs to be, it's like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, just right, like the porridge was just right, and the chair was just the right size, and the bed is just the right size, for Goldilocks. So we're the Goldilocks, and Buddha activity needs to suit us. That's about the, but there are endless beings, just in this moment, just in this world, 8 billion people, all at the same time just now. We're coexisting with them on this planet, let alone the animals and the insects and so on. So there is no way to plan help for 8 billion people. I mean, just to help me, I need a lot of help, and it's complicated, right? If we weren't talking about Buddha mind, the all-embracing, wonderful mind, which is at the root of everything. If we were talking about, Dalai Lama, and I dial a Lama somewhere in India and then put them on my case, so much information to absorb, so much planning will be needed to help me. But here we're talking about instant, perfect help. So we have some examples, and but the point is, it happens spontaneously. So I don't know about you, but in one point in my life, I was always amazed by my own reflexes. If something fell off a table, you've caught it before you've even thought about it. Didn't have time to think, plan, or anything. All of a sudden you find that you've done it, you've caught it. And I was always amazed at myself, because when I was a kid and playing cricket, like English boys do, I could never catch the ball. Even though it was obvious, I'd drop it. I was absolutely useless at sport. So later on in my life, when I catch something falling off a table, I thought, how'd you do that? That's amazing. And so we get some examples of it happens before you think. And now let's turn off Dharma for a second. I want to tell a joke. It's nothing at all to do with Buddhism. Forget you ever heard it. So this is just a joke. It's rather a crude joke, right? So that's why it's not suitable, really. So we'll be back. We're coming back. Okay, we're coming back. So it's a job interview, and there are 3 candidates. And the interviewer, what would you call them these days, the personnel person, he says, okay, I want to ask you a question and see how you answer. He says, what is the fastest ever thing? And the first person, he says, what do you think, Mr. So-and-so? He says, I think electricity, because it travels, you turn on the switch and the light comes on. It's pretty much instantaneous. Well, it travels at the speed of light. Thank you, Mr. So-and-so. And he turns to the next person and he says, so what do you think is the fastest thing? He said, thought. As soon as you see something or hear something, the thought's there. I think it's probably even quicker than electricity. Thank you, Mr. So-and-so. And now the third person, he says, so what do you think is the fastest thing? Do you agree with the other two? Or the third person thinks, and he says, diarrhea. He said, because I had diarrhea the other day, I didn't have time to think or to turn the light on to go to the toilet. And he said, you get the job. So that's the joke, right? And we're just looking at the idea of spontaneity, things that happen without spontaneously, I suppose is the word. One example I've used all the way through this course is an excellent example, is a mirror reflection, because as soon as you're in front of the mirror, there's a perfect reflection of you. So many hundreds of details and everything is spontaneous, and it's your reflection. It's nobody else's. It's not like I'd turn up in front of the mirror and I'd see Kim in the mirror. It's only if Kim goes in front of the mirror that she gets the Kim reflection. And that's a very good example. It's not one of the examples here. And because, at the time of Buddha, they didn't have mirrors like we've got. Mirrors were mainly polished metal. Glass was, I think it had been invented, but it was incredibly rare and expensive. And they didn't have mirrors. So the only mirrors were reflections in very still water where you could see yourself. I mean, we're so used to seeing ourselves. And when I used to travel a lot, it's very interesting. Some Dharma centers don't have mirrors or many mirrors. Or in the Lama's room, there's only a tiny mirror. And some places have very big mirrors. Our Brussels center has about 5 meter high mirrors on the staircase where you can have a lot of fun doing things. Anyway, just thinking around this is to help us think about spontaneity. And then here, absolute spontaneity, not even the time of the speed of light for things to happen. Instantaneous, spontaneous reaction. To help beings, that's what we're looking at, Buddha activity to help beings. The help that comes from Buddha mind is spontaneous and immediate. The second point we look at in this summary is its ceaselessness. Buddha activity is not on and off. So again, compared with our activity, you do one job, then you do another job, you're involved in a mission or a work for weeks, months, years even. But it begins, it carries on, and it ends. Here, we're not looking at that, we're looking at ceaselessness. So verse 281 and 282. Endowed with a jhana ocean, filled with a multitude of gem-like qualities, and with the sunlight of virtue and jhana, the Buddhas have achieved all jhanas. Without middle or end, exceedingly vast, Buddhahood is all-pervading, like space, perfectly seeing that this treasure of unsullied qualities is in every being, without the slightest variation, the wind of their perfect compassion dispels the complex cloud banks of defilements and false knowledge. So, I'm sorry, in the summary I said it's mainly spontaneity and non-conceptual nature, which are very important, but it's mainly spontaneity in this second point, ceaselessness. Now, these two verses are very rich. They point to a lot of things, but many of those things we've already studied. So there are a lot of examples in there. First, it has an ocean of wisdom, a jhana ocean, filled with a multitude of gem-like qualities. Remember, we saw earlier in the text, in ancient India, and moreover in Central Asia, the ocean was considered a place full of gems. I mean, it's mainly corals, pearls, abalone shells, which were a form of currency in many cultures. And so, the ocean's different from the earth. The earth has precious stones, but you need to dig, you need to know where to dig, and so on. So the myth or the idea is, for people who don't know about deep oceans, I love history, so you go back, you see how cultures traveled along coasts. They exploited the shallow waters around the coast. They weren't out in the deep oceans. When they traveled, their ships followed the coast, so you knew where you were, mainly. So there, people dive into the water and they come out with a treasure. Here in the Mediterranean, just where I live, here, when I first came here was 53 years ago. You could dive into the water and still bring up corals. Now, Mediterranean coral is very deep red, it's beautiful coral. But so many people have done that there's none left. Coral only grows in shallow water, it doesn't go deep down. So, but the fact that you can just dive into the water and come up with something very valuable like that, it's different from mining. Mining is laborious. So here, then people can get pearls from oysters and abalone shells and all sorts of things. So that's the myth we're dealing with in this example. Here, it's an ocean of wisdom that's filled with wonderful gems. It's not just general wisdom about Buddha nature. There's all wisdom about this, wisdom about that. Like if we go back to my time with Khenpo Tsenam, this wonderful doctor, you walk through the hills, we walked through the hills near Samiling in the forests, and say, you can take that, you take the root, you do this with it, you do that, like a herbalist. No. The world becomes a different place. You start to see the fields and the forest filled, they're like medicine chests. It's amazing. And so the Buddha's knowledge is not just the general knowledge about the void nature of everything and the interdependence that's everywhere. It also knows how to guide people, this person, and how to heal the body, how to heal the mind, how to heal karma. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. So this Buddhas have this ocean filled with a multitude of gem-like qualities, and shining on that ocean is the sunlight of virtue and jhana, goodness and wisdom combined is like bright, bright light. So because of that, Buddhas, we're looking at Buddha activity, have achieved everything that can be achieved, summed up as Vimuktikaya and the form kayas, or Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nimanakaya. They've achieved everything that can be achieved. Their activity has no middle or no end. It's not like our activity, which begins, has a duration, and comes to an end. It's spontaneous activity from that space which is beyond time and space. So exceedingly vast, without middle or end. Buddhahood is all-pervading, like the space, and perfectly seeing that all beings have this nature as the truth of themselves, but they're lost in the delusion of themselves, in the lie of themselves. They don't know who they truly are. Like people with amnesia, they're lost in their delusions of self and their story. They don't realize that they have what? This wonderful ocean of wisdom shining in the sunlight of goodness. That's who they are. So from that space that knows, then compassion wells up and is compared here to like a wind that blows through and shakes things up. The wind of their perfect compassion dispels the complex banks of clouds of defilements and wrong understanding. So there we've had the summary of this chapter. Spontaneity, ceaselessness. Now we go into the fuller explanation. We start with the spontaneity. Since thoughts of for whom, by what means, through which training, where, when, do not arise, these masters of wisdom are spontaneous at all times. How are you doing? It's okay. So, for instance, when I was Sakon Rinpoche's secretary, and before there were such things as emails and instant communication, communication came through the post on a piece of paper in the form of a letter. Now, this might not mean something to the younger people who are looking at this, but things took time. Things took time. So going through his daily correspondence, and say, oh, we've got a letter from, oh yeah, so not seen him for a year. And then, well, blah, 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 this is the question, this is the problem. So then Rinpoche would come back, with an answer. Oh yeah, tell him to, whatever it is, eat less, meditate more, or whatever, there'd be an answer. And in terms of, what's he doing now, where is he working, not working, all of this. So it works in terms of for who are we talking about, how are we going to help him, by what means, which training, where, when, time, place, circumstances. In terms of Buddha mind helping people, none of that's there. There's not a somebody or a God or something, the Buddha mind thinking. None of those thoughts are there. No thoughts are there. But, and this is the amazing thing, there is perfect response. So it says these are the masters of wisdom, wise activity, who act spontaneously at all times. So when we come to verse 283 over the page 274, it unpacks these ideas. For whom means the temperament of the person to be trained, by what means, which of the many, many methods, through which training, then which actions to use to train them. This line, we could think about it and talk about it for a lot. Through which actions. Now we've not got a Buddha thinking and doing something. We've got the universal true nature of mind. Call it the universe if that makes it easier for you. Through which actions. So, people say not in profound Buddhist terms, but the universe is doing this to me, whatever. It's taken away my job, or it's given me this sickness, and so on. It's the action that can give rise to learning and freedom, mastery, the things we need, stability, or getting our priorities in a different order. And so that line is very, very interesting, through which training. So not all training is formal, like practice. Do this practice, do this meditation. Training is also existential. When life throws circumstances at us, how we can either turn them, like the example I gave earlier on today, of one person in prison, in a luxury prison, who finds it misery, and another person in a horrible prison who turns it into great advantage. This is what we're looking at there. Or where and when is about the specific circumstances. And then we move on to the ceaselessness. And there we've got 3 verses, 284, 285, 286. Buddha activity is unceasing, being devoid of concept. Being devoid of concept regarding true freedom, freedom's support, the result of freedom, authentic possession of that result, the obscurations which veil it, and the necessary conditions for breaking through them. Genuine release is the 10 levels. Its cause is the 2 accumulations. The result is supreme enlightenment, an enlightenment which beings truly possess. Its obscuring veils are the endless defilements, subsidiary defilements, and latent tendencies. Great compassion is the condition for destroying these. So those verses are dense, they're meant to be memorized. They're unpacked in the commentary, so that's on page 275, which first it says, true freedom is the genuine release from samsara, and that's attained at the first bodhisattva level. So Buddha activity first has to take people through a journey that gets them rid of their ego and brings them to the first bodhisattva level. First bodhisattva level, ego gone, ego delusions gone. That's the activity needs to get people out of the misery of samsara, to realize that the delusion of self causes that misery, and to go beyond it and to stay beyond it in a stable way. That's first bodhisattva level. So that's the first task of Buddha activity. And then after that, to go level after level through the Bodhisattva path. How does Buddha activity do that? It gives us the cause for achieving it. And the cause or the support is the two accumulations. Two accumulations, goodness, virtue, we call it. We need to be good, do good things, do the right things and only the right things, and only good and helpful things. And wisdom, the wisdom of shunyata, how even though we're doing good things, it's doing good dreamlike things in a dreamlike world to get a good dreamlike result. Wisdom. And the wisdom that understands cause and effect and how to create our spiritual evolution. The next point, the result of the freedom attained in the Bodhisattva levels is the completion of their work when enlightenment's attained after the 10th level. That's the result of working free. When you've got that 100% result, the next point, the authentic possession of this result happens at enlightenment, which is as it is nisjhana and many nisjhana, the recognition of the primordial nature in everybody. That can only happen when whatever was obscuring the truth of that has been removed, duality. The obscurations which are blocking this for us are what are known as the self-perpetuating root defilements. It's such lovely Buddhist language. When you get a newcomer to Dharma and you tell them about the self-perpetuating root defilements, they kind of defilements, root, self-perpetuating. We kind of get used to it, but it really is jargon. It's Buddhist in-speak. But it is what it means. We are something that defiles. Defiles means it spoils things, it corrupts them, it makes them not what they could have been. The root ones are like a root that gives rise to many branches on the surface. What's deep underground psychologically in our mind gives rise to all the subsidiary defilements, whether we look at 21 or 25, there's long lists. So the root ones, desire, aversion, pride, jealousy, ignorance. They are what obscure liberation. And the necessary conditions for breaking through the wall of all those things is the great compassion of Buddha mind. So there we had 6 points. True freedom, its cause, the result, authentic possession, the obscurations which veil it, and the condition for breaking through the obscurations. It says, these 6 points should be known as being respectively like an ocean, the sun, space, a treasure, clouds, and the wind that we had in the previous verses. The levels are like an ocean of jhana's waters, possessing the qualities of its ocean's gems. The 2 accumulations are like the sun, since by them all beings are sustained. Enlightenment is like space, being vast, centerless, and without end. The core character of beings is like a treasure, being the very nature of utterly pure enlightenment. The covering defilements are like the hosts of clouds, like clouds because they are transient, pervasive, and not fixed entities. Compassion is like a mighty wind, being ever present to blow the clouds away. Page 277, verse 291. Since their release is for others' benefit, since they see the equality of themselves and beings, and since their deeds have not been fully completed, their activity is unbroken until samsara ends. So there we had this set of examples: the ocean, the gems inside it, the sun, the space, and the wind and the clouds. These are there, as any example is there, for us to go away and chew on, to think about. Go to a nice place, indoors, outdoors, somewhere where you've got the time to make your mind a better place to be in. And then we think about the Buddha's wisdom like an ocean. You really think about an ocean. Maybe go to an ocean, stand on the shore, or go sailing across it and see how vast and how it touches so many shorelines and so on. And think of the treasures underwater. Give yourself a nice moment sitting in the sun and feel the warmth and the sustenance, how the sun sustains. It sustains. Look at everything that grows. Look at our own body. Take away the sun. It's gone. Very, very powerful, this sun. We're only alive, and everything around us is sustained by the sun, even in a UK winter, without the sun, no gravity, no light at all, no warmth at all. The whole planet goes down to, 0 Kelvin, probably, very quickly. Nothing there to stop it. So, sustenance. We need to go away and then each time refer back. What are we thinking about this for? The enlightened activity of this pure and wonderful Buddha mind beyond time and space, how it acts within time and space. Really spend good time and think about it and get something of a feel, as much as we can on this level, for the difference between Buddha activity and our activity. So you can see in here, the ceaselessness is equated with thoughtlessness or non-conceptuality. That is, it's deep. If you have a meditation experience beyond concept, without concept, that might help. So now we're still in the explanation, but now it's an expanded explanation with 9 examples. So let's start on them before we stop for today. So we're going to get 9. Verse 292 gives us the list. Indra, the drum, clouds, Brahma, the sun, a wish-fulfilling gem, an echo, space, and earth. Like those, is the Tathagata, or more precisely, the Tathagata's activity. At page 278, first example. So maybe I'll explain the example first, and then we'll look at the verses. Indra's palace, we're looking at, the example is Indra, but it's mainly Indra's palace. It's up in the god realms, which in India were considered actually up. They're kind of up there. If you go vertically upwards into space, then you eventually get to the god's realms. That's the way they saw the universe. So Indra's palace is made of a gem that's called Vaidurya. So this was a translator's problem in the early days, because it's a gem. So then which gem is it? And some people said lapis lazuli, and they saw some translations it says lapis lazuli. Other translations it becomes sapphire. Other translations it becomes beryl. Beryl is jewel. And none of them were right. So I once went to Trungpa Rinpoche to explore it. I said, what would it correspond to here as gems? And he said, actually, it doesn't exist in our world. So that's a relief. You don't have to find the right translation. But then what do you call it? How do you describe it? Well, you can't really. But anyway, it seems, after talking with him quite a bit, as far as I've understood, that Benduria is, closest we can get to it is sapphire. Right? Sapphire. And if you know sapphire goes from mainly blue to white shades. So Indra's palace is made of Benduria. So we can imagine it's like walls made of sapphire. And so now this is the weird thing. Like I said, it's an example to help us understand, but it's an example that we probably can't access. So it says, people on earth with good karma, when they look up in the sky, they can see Indra's palace. But because it's built of very smooth sapphire, the sapphire reflects the landscapes all around. So they see the God realm. They can't see the God realms directly, but they see the walls of Indra's palace like a mirror. And in that mirror, they see the reflection of the divine realm that is in, and they're just mind blown. It's just so nice. It's so, it just feels so pathetic down here on earth. When you look up at the palace, it's another world, And so people are inspired by that. They say, I want to be like Indra. I want it. So then they understand spontaneously, because of the power of the walls of the palace, that to get there they need to lead a very, very pure life, and a life that never harms or damages other beings. And so it says those of them who do that to get out of the misery, the relative misery they see themselves in, and who do it properly enough, then they will get reborn as an Indra-type god. So the point is these palace walls. It's a magical word, let's put it that way. And we say the Deva world or the divine realms, they're like magical realms. It's not just stone. It's stone that has magical qualities, so that those with an open heart and good karma, when they see it, they spontaneously understand why all of those wonders that they see in the God realms, how they came about through good karma. It says the walls of the palace don't need to think, look, there's Wendy or Alan or somebody else down there. I need to send them a reflection to inspire them. It just is magical Vaidurya gem. Simply by being what it is, people with good karma can see something and they're inspired. So that's the example for the Buddha activity, which doesn't need to think and focus on the person and their circumstances and their abilities and so on. But by just being what it is, and through the connection with the person on earth's good karma, the whole thing evolves with a good outcome. It would be very helpful, I must say, if we could have a group holiday now from the people on this course, and we could go and make a pilgrimage to a place where you can see Indra's palace, and then we could all take pictures and see the wonderful things and see really it's just mind-bendingly beautiful, and the life there is so perfect and peaceful, and there's not the greed and the anger and the warfare and all of those things. So anyway, that's the example. Let's look at the verses. It also, now looking at one today, gives us the flavor, the feel of these examples. So it's verses 293 to 298 at the bottom of page 278. Had the ground here the quality of flawless Vaidurya, one would see apparent in it, through its clarity, the king of the gods, accompanied by hosts of young goddesses. Perfectly victorious, that's the name of his resplendent palace. They'd see the divine abodes, other places with various wonders, and all the many kinds of enjoyment that the gods possess. Seeing these appearances, multitudes of men and women living on the earth, surface of the earth, would exclaim, "Oh, may we also before long become like this divine king." Having sincerely made such a prayer, so that it would be realized, they would truly adopt virtue and persist in it. Though they may not appreciate that these are just appearances, they would nevertheless, through virtue, be reborn as gods once they departed from the surface of the earth. These appearances, what they see, are absolutely unintentional. They involve no movement. Nevertheless, their presence on earth is accompanied by great benefit. So it says nothing shifts. None of the gods come down to earth. It's just a vision that the fortunate can see in space, but nevertheless it brings a lot of benefit. So then if we get the explanation, go to page 280. And there's a couple of versions of this story. The one I told you is when people look up into space, people with virtue. There's another version, which is if all of the ground here were to become Vaidurya. Well, that's not going to happen, but if it were, then because of this magical quality of Vaidurya, one would see the God realms up above. There are two versions of the story. So anyway, let's go to we've had the example. Now let's see how that applies. Verses 299 to 305. In a similar way, beings with faultless faith and other virtues will, through practicing these qualities, see the perfect Buddha manifest in their minds. So now it's applied to us. If our faith is good, and if we develop the other virtues, then through practice we will see the perfect Buddha in our mind. Our mind will experience Buddha in the mind. Doesn't mean we'll see with our eyes. Our mind's eye will perceive Buddha. Our mind will know Buddha mind. Verse 300, endowed with the marks and the meaningful signs, they will see him walking, standing, sitting, sleeping, and enacting all the modes of conduct, proclaiming the teachings of peace, or without speaking, remaining in meditation, performing various sorts of miracles, and filled with magnificence and splendor. So that's like seeing, in the example, people see the God realms. When we practice Dharma, we experience the Nirmanakaya or Sambhogakaya. Verse 302, having seen this and felt aspiration for such Buddhahood, they apply themselves to it most excellently through properly adopting its causes, and the desired state is reached. The appearances of the Dharma path are completely concept-free and involve no shift. Buddha doesn't need to come out of somewhere to us. Our mind being open enables us to experience Buddha mind. Ordinary beings are believed not to understand the fact that these are the manifestation of their own mind. Yet, to see such forms nevertheless brings them benefit. Progressively, through what is seen, established in the jhana one after another, they will see the inner true Dharmakaya through eyes of jhana. So what this last couple of verses mean is that we live in a world of dualistic perception. Look, here, this talk. Ken this side, you that side. Two very different sides. It's non-stop. We don't get a break from it. When you try and be non-dual, you're somebody trying to be non-dual. That's a duality in itself. We can't stop it. We live in a dualistic world. But just like the God realms reflect down on earth and people can see them, in our dualistic perception, we meet, in practice, we meet highly evolved spiritual beings. We meet the Buddha, and the Buddha seems like somebody other, sitting, walking, talking, living, dying, giving teachings. That's the only way, given our nature of dualistic perception, we could ever start to meet. So it says, through that and through practicing the teachings, step by step, jhana by jhana, and so on, gradually we come to the place where we realize it was never something separate outside, but the purity of our own minds work within the mind, giving us that dualistic experience. That's what that set of verses means. And then, let's leave it there. We've not finished this first example. We'll carry on to the other version and the ground becoming lapis lazuli and a conclusion. So let's dedicate anything that was useful and good today. May whatever virtue was created by this session contribute to the state of omniscience being attained by the main enemy, mind's defilements, being completely defeated. Through that, may each and every sentient being become freed from the ocean of existence, troubled by its waves of rebirth, aging, sickness, and death. May this precious bodhicitta arise in those in whom it's not arisen. In those in whom it has arisen, may its development know no setbacks, and may it increase ever more and more. Through this virtue, may we quickly achieve Mahamudra and establish every single sentient being in that same accomplishment. Thank you very much. It's your turn.
Ken, I have a question.
Go ahead, Vicky.
You know, with the Buddha and in the first 2 points, does that mean, like, as an ordinary human being like me, if I then make prayers to the Buddha to help me with a particular situation, does that mean that they can help me?
Yeah. It's prayer is very, very, very important. There are several functions of prayer, and prayer is aspiration. So if we aspire for, can you say, good things, not good things in the worldly sense, good Buddhist things, for virtue and for the right circumstances and for the obstacles to our practice to be overcome and so on, then in our dualistic world, prayer is the interaction between our present-day karmic reality and this timeless purity, which is said in the verses, is everywhere, but it's also the pure nature of ourselves. So depending on how you see it, we're praying to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who embody the timeless purity out there. The power of our prayers makes an interdependence, a connection, and if we're praying for good and useful things, there can be help coming back, of course. Support, we call it blessing often. We can see it also as this superficial, confused, samsaric side of ourself is making a plea to our own basic, inner, profound purity. And that has the power to guide us from within. We can see it both ways at the same time. That's very helpful, seeing both ways at the same time. Does that help at all, Vicky?
Yes, just a clarification on that. I understand that if I pray to the Buddhas to help me with my mind, to help me with my practice, to help me overcome obstacles in my practice, I can appreciate that they would be helpful in that regard. If I'm dealing with a relative world problem, such as, let's just say, I can't find a job, for example, if I pray to the Buddhas in that regard to help them deal with a relative problem, and that might be all linked in with my karma, for example, it's this distinction I'm making. I appreciate they can help me overcome obstacles in my practice. I have 100% faith in that, but I'm not so sure whether it's appropriate or indeed, whether it's an appropriate thing to do to ask them for help with very ordinary, mundane things. And if they have the power to help that.
There it gets, I wouldn't say more complicated, it gets more interesting, let's say. First, direct answer to the question, according to the scriptures, then they do have the power to rearrange what would otherwise happen normally in karma. So they can shift things that would have happened, postpone them to a later date, bring forward or bring to the fore the ripening of good karma that might not have happened in the ordinary way of circumstances. So they definitely have the power to do that. But in terms of our own ethics as Buddhists, it's not so much a question of to get a job, but to. And what comes to mind is how people would express it these days. If it's the right thing for me to get a job just now, then that job will come up. But if it's the right thing, if it's the best thing for my practice to not get a job, then for me to be able to understand that this is what's going on, to make use of that rather than seeing it as an obstacle, then to turn it into a benefit of some sort. There's a level of both acceptance and interference going on at the same time. We're asking for help, but that help might not manifest just as a material benefit. It might I'm trying to think of examples I've known of people who really have prayed and prayed, if they've been close to like Karmapa or something like that. They've got faith. They've got faith and devotion to Karmapa. I'm thinking of one young lady who was very young when I first knew her, just 15, I think, and really wanted a boyfriend, or the right partner for life, and it didn't work, and it didn't work with this one, it didn't work with the next one, but she kept faith in Karmapa and ended up, it took a few years, with the right one. And so sometimes what seems like, my love life never works, in the end it was for the good, because the failures got it to the right one. And sometimes people are looking for a job, or sometimes people, of course, if we're praying for health, then we want to get better, but more than that, we want our mind to blossom through our present circumstances. So whether that's suffering in a worldly sense or pleasure, not pleasure, what's agreeable in a worldly sense is not obvious to say. Sometimes people learn a lot through hardship, and sometimes we need the worldly benefits. People who've suffered enough need a break, otherwise they crack, or something else. So it's complicated.
Yeah, but I think that's helpful. That it is possible. It's a bit like the serenity prayer, that you cannot ask for the change to happen, but you're also granting the ability to be able to cope with it if it doesn't work out that way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that serenity prayer is wonderful.
And there's also the treasury of space, where gurus, magical siddhas, they pull stuff right out of the air. So that also happens. And I've seen that happen for myself.
Good. Yeah.
I imagine that I need something. I go to Costco, it's on sale. It's magic. It's very simple. You just pray to the Costco gods. I hope you know I'm joking.
That's why I'm silent. I think everybody appreciates that you're joking.
Ken,
Mm-hmm.
is there a session next week or is it Tonglen next week?
No, we meet again in a fortnight's time. Yeah. And
Okay.
then I've already started advertising it on internet, but I'm hoping to finish this course before Christmas. I'm just looking at my calendar. So we end on Saturday, the 20th of December. We should have finished this text, which will be something quite extraordinary. And then after that, I thought before starting another course, based on a text, to have a few easygoing one-off sessions, especially seeing as we have the Christmas period and the New Year period, and people get busy in those times. So I'm going to do sessions on Kaju Dohas, on spiritual songs, for a while, a few weeks, I'm not sure how long, and then see about starting another course. And your suggestions are welcome for that.
Ken, can I
Yeah,
just ask, would you ever be able to do anything in person in France or at Sammy Ling?
I think my in-person days are over. I don't know how much life I've got left. Don't think it's a lot. And certainly the circumstances at the moment keep me here. So apart from Zoom, I can't set up a course here.
Well, thank you so much for the time that you're giving us now online, Ken. It's so precious.
Yeah.
And for all that you've given at Sammy Ling before and Sammy Songs. Thank you.
I mean, it's not impossible. It's not impossible that locally here, but I'm not a Dharma center, so it would be the sort of thing where people would need to fix up their own accommodation. We'd need to rent a space and have a week together or 10 days. That's not impossible, but I don't know what topic we'd do and who'd be interested, and because if you've got the money to travel here, you can also travel to more interesting places.
Thank you.
Ken, you've done some very good teachings on Chen Rezig in the past, which I found extremely valuable. I was wondering if you would ever consider doing any teachings on Green Tara.
Green Tara is too big. I don't mean Green Tara herself, but I mean the practice. I mean, there's no point doing teachings unless it's related to a practice. It's only really useful for somebody who's doing the practice. And then the Green Tara practice is there. There's a lot in them. In the practice itself, you come to like the 21 praises to Tara and to explain that, and the 21 Taras and so on. And it's not something where I've got a lot of expertise. I mean, there are people, I don't know if she still exists, I hope so, like Annie Kunzang in Scotland, who spent so many years teaching this. There you get a really high quality teaching, which you wouldn't get from me because I do some Tara practice, but I've always found it strange because if you really, really rush the practice, you can do a session in an hour. But to do the practice in the way that I think would be appropriate, you'd need at least 3 hours. So that you have time for each bit of the visualization. And really, rushed practice can work if somebody's really familiar with what they're doing. So if you go to Samiling Shrine Room and the people, they rocket through Tara, and it's all you can do to keep up with the chanting. But to know what you're doing in each step, and to have trained in each step and really to savor it. This is the moment of such offerings, and how you visualize it, how you feel it in yourself, how you extend it. There just isn't the time. So I've not always been, comfortable with that in Samiling. It's a blessing for Samiling. It's nice that they do it. But if people do Tara practice, green Tara practice, there's a lot. There's a lot. It's so much. Wonderful. It's wonderful. And 21 praises. It's some of the nicest poetry that ever came into this world. They're amazing.
Yeah, I've had a couple of introductions to it, and I find doing a very sort of brief version of the practice has often been really helpful in the past, especially before I encountered the Chenrezig practice. But I agree that the more I've seen of the actual, I've only got a copy of the text, and we went through it a few weeks back at Samye Dzong in Glasgow, and that kind of opened out how much there is to it, and I thought, this is huge. I feel it'd be a valuable one to do, but at the same time, like you say, it looks like a very big thing, and so I'm just curious to sort of find out more, but recognize that I probably won't. I'll never master it this time around, I think.
No, that's not my strong point. And I'd know that. Some people, they know green Tara practice so well, and all the stories behind it and so on.
Great, thank you, Ken.
Can you teach the way of the Bodhisattva, Shanti Devas, Ken?
Well, that'd be a big one. It's a big text. It's a big text. And then when you get to the 9th chapter, there you have to go through, to present it properly, middle way philosophy. It's like 9th chapter is what's in the verses is the tip of are the tips of many, many icebergs, right? So you can't half do that. You either explain it enough so that it's got some meaning, or you explain it to people who've done quite a lot of middle way training. But really, it's the most important one. I mean, there's stories that have grown up around that text, and they say that when he was giving the 9th chapter, do you know the story of that text? He was a monk in the monastery, and in Tibetan it's always Nalanda when they talk about the big Indian monastery, whether it was Nalanda, Vikramashila. He was 8th century, so it could well have been Vikramashila or Dantapuri. But actually his main practice was dream yoga, and as far as the other monks were concerned, he was sleeping so much of the time. He missed lots of the lectures and the talks and the teachings given by great masters, and everyone thought, he turns up for meals and he goes back and sleeps. He's ashamed. They were ashamed of him as being part of their they like study. It was a place where study was a really big deal. But you can't throw somebody out of a monastery for sleeping. It's not an offense. And so they tried to devise a way that he would be disgraced out of the monastery or shamed out. So they said, we'll have a knowledge sort of competition where everyone has to sit on the teaching seat and explain something, give a teaching. And they say, because he's never been to most of the talks, he'll be so ashamed, he'll just feel he needs to leave. That was their plan, to get rid of him. And so when it came round to his turn, he sat on the throne, and then they say spontaneously he gave that text, which we now has the Bodhisattva's way of life, or way of the Bodhisattva. And that when he got to the 9th chapter on Shunyata, he gradually started to rise up into space until he'd finished the chapter, by which time he was gone. They could still hear his voice, but he was gone over the horizon, and they all felt totally ashamed that they'd had such a great master there, and they'd been just putting him down because they couldn't see his qualities. So then, according to the legend, they sent people out to find out where he'd landed, more or less. And they found him a long way away in Sri Lanka. And so they had to bring him back up to north central India because they wanted clarification. Once he'd gone, immediately they all tried to write down what he'd said, but they were unclear about some points, so they wanted to get him back. So the 9th chapter really is a big deal, and we would need, it wouldn't be quite so long as this course, but it's a big undertaking for somebody, as sort of, you say, old and unwell as myself. So there is a condensed version of it. It's based on it, and it's called The 37 Practices of the Bodhisattva by Mulchu Tome. That's a wonderful text. That's a possibility.
Ken?
Yes, Rose.
Is there a text on calling the Guru from afar?
You mean beside the actual prayer itself?
Yeah.
There must be, but I don't have one.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not something you're familiar with, I was just thinking, because that would be something that wasn't as lengthy and still is obviously very deep. But anyway, no, that's...
it's a practices text.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
It's not everyone's cup of tea either, because it's a lament about what rubbish we are, basically. It's and it's an amazing reminder. And oh gosh, stories. Okay, I was in Hamburg with Akon Rinpoche, and we were visiting the Hamburg group. And one of the people there who'd organized it, Hannah Hundorf, she'd done the long 4-year retreat, and she'd done the Jamgon Controls, calling the Guru from afar. And even though, how can you say, she appreciated its message, it didn't speak directly to her like it should do. What happens in retreat is the nuns take it in turn to be the first one to get up and to sing this, to wake up all of the other nuns, so that you wake up listening to it. It's basically a list of all the things that can go wrong with your spiritual practice that you're admitting you've done and asking for the Guru's help. So that's how the day starts, and especially if you've got somebody who sings nicely. So she's a singer, Hannah, and over the retreat she made her own version, same ideas, but in modern language. So when she was quite shy, but she said to Akon, she said to me, she said, "Do you think I dare sing this to Akon Rinpoche? Or will he think it's absolute sacrilege?" I said, "No, I think give it a try." So we're in this kitchen, and she sang it, and he listened. And when we got to the end, sort of we're waiting, he said, "Sing it again." And she sang it again. And he said, "This is how it should be. It's a language, it's in modern, very direct, very biting language." He said, "This is exactly how calling the Guru from afar, should be." So, I'll post a link I've done a version of Hannah's version too, and I'll post a link. It's on YouTube somewhere, I think. But yeah, it's a practice song. It's really, it's only when you practice in retreat like that all day long, and then you see just how devious the deep subconscious is, and how even a spiritual path and even being in retreat, you're turning it's ego food rather than liberation food. So you start the day by reminding yourself of all of that, and then tuning into the Guru to go the pure way in your practice. And it's from that point of view, it's wonderful. But for a lot of people reading it, it sounds like beating yourself up for nothing. If you see what I mean, lots of people are into affirmation rather than putting yourself down. And a whole long list of complaints like that's too much, because it's not short.
Yeah. There is something which I'm actually longing for a long time now, because you've been around all these wonderful masters, and you experience so many amazing, experiences and teachings from them. Not formal teaching, but to be a human being, let's say. Then I don't know. I would like to hear, because for me it's a big inspiration. I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Yeah, but I think, plenty enough of that comes through each week. I can't help but telling stories or taking examples from my own thing. And I'd rather concentrate on the great master's teachings, really, I would. And I wouldn't know how to put my own stuff together. I did try. People asked something like this. Quite a lot of people have asked. And I started writing my story. I got a few hundred pages done, but that only got me to Samiling in 1971. So, and then after that, I had total writer's block. And 10 years later, I realized why I had the writer's block after Akon Rinpoche died. And I realized if I carried on with the writing of it, what I'd need to, but I've never had time to carry on. So.
Ken, that you did write, is there any way that it is available or might be available?
Well, it's not. That's not Dharma. That's the story of an English schoolboy who became a hippie and who went traveling and who went to East and who, it's a nice story, but it's not got it's before all of these Dharma. Well, not really, no, because it's got me 5 months in Dharmasala and the time with Goenka and yeah, but only just the beginnings of that. It kind of shows how I connected up with Dharma. Yeah, it's written.
I'm sure some of us would be interested.
Okay. Right, what do they say? PM me. Private message me. Okay, so we've done the dedication. And so for this course, see you in 2 weeks' time. And for those doing the Tonglen, then see you next week. Take good care.
Yes, Ken. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, and hello and goodbye to everybody.
Try now. Try everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ken.